Wait.
Hello, welcome to Sankofa Video Books and Cafe. I'm Christina Joy, the events coordinator here. We are located at 2714 Georgia Avenue Northwest, right across the street from the illustrious Howard University, HU.
You know.
I know that's right.
Yes.
Tonight we have a very special event. We are launching this new book by Kimberly Johnson right here. This is Kim Johnson. Give it up. It's called Invisible Sun, and tonight we have Maritza and Maika Muli in conversation with Kim about her new book. So without further ado, take it away.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, especially with both of these sisters who are also amazing authors, and they co-authored together, and so you should also buy all their books. Yeah, so definitely. But yeah, thank you to all the family and friends who came out today.
Hi everyone, thank you Christina and Sankofa and Kim for inviting us. We're so excited to be here. So before we get into our many questions, Kim is going to get us started with a reading from Invisible Sun. Whoop whoop.
But before we do that, let's introduce ourselves so folks know who is here with us. So Kim, let's start it off with you. Let's give a little bit of introduction about who you are and what we're going to do today.
Yeah, so young adult author. This is My America was my debut. It's really special to be in this space with you all, especially because when I debuted, it was right at the beginning of the pandemic, which is also a lot of inspirations to why I wrote this book. And a lot of the things that I did, and they both know too, is we did them in our homes. And I personally did it in my closet. It's all my events that I were, scrunched in the corner of a closet and trying to create this community experience online. And it's just great to be in a space with, friendly folks and around beautiful books. So yeah, so thank you, and thank you Sankofa for the opportunity.
Yes. So, like Christina said earlier, I am Maika Muli. My sister is Maritza Muli. And we are co-authors. Our first book was Dear Haiti, Love Elaine. Our second, one of the good ones, and our most recent is The Summer I Ate the Rich, which is forthcoming from Macmillan Imprint FSG Young Readers. In addition to being published authors, we are also PhD students. I'm a PhD student at Howard University in the Communication, Culture, and Media Studies program. And Maritza?
I'm a PhD student at the University of Pennsylvania's Graduate School of Education. Not as fun as Howard.
All right, so we are going to hop into a wonderful set of questions so that you can get to know Kim a little bit better and also learn more about this wonderful book, Invisible Sun, which if you haven't purchased already, you absolutely should. This was an amazing book. It was also a little bit triggering because it talks about COVID. So we're going to go ahead and hop right into it.
Great. Okay, so I'm just going to read just like a page and a half from the first chapter. Something fun about my book is, I do talk about a lot of different themes in my book, and I always like to prepare my reader for it, and so I have a fun time with creating chapter titles. And so all the chapter titles are songs, and you can find the song list on Spotify under Invisible Sun. So the first chapter is Don't Speak. February 27, 2020. I live in the whitest big city on the blackest block, simultaneously seen and unseen. I used to hate the erasure, but now I don't mind if I stay hidden, especially since McLaren Youth Correctional Facility is in my literal rear view. But the longer we idle in Portland traffic, the more reality sinks in that that's not how any of this works. Marcus tries to bury this truth with conversations on moving forward, on possibilities, but it will be as hard to shake the strike against me as it is for the windshield wipers to win their battle against this torrential downpour. Marcus's and my coexistence in this car proves that fact. There will always be somebody to check me, to explain myself to keep at a distance, which makes who I roll with matter more than ever. And I don't mean my boy Boogie, who knows I'm more likely to be up late reading Octavia Butler or scouring through my collection of Black Panther comics than be hanging out. I mean my other so-called friends, white friends who've been known to mouth off to an officer without fear, who don't think twice about trying to be anything they want. Meanwhile, I'm not trying to be nothing at all. Marcus hands me coffee he picked up in the first drive-thru after we left the facility. Coffee is nasty. My stomach can't take it, but I also can't say no to him. I'm so close to semi-freedom, I'm not taking any chances. Not today. Dre, how you really feel about all this? Marcus adjusts his mirror like he'll see me better. All right. What am I supposed to say? Living the dream, riding with my probation officer? Can't wait to get home so I can still be under surveillance. I know I'm wallowing in my situation, which isn't like me. I'm the type to keep my feet and claw my way above water, even if it's only with words. But staying silent seems like the best way to just get home. Thank you.
I was ready for you to read the whole chapter.
I was like, I would just be sitting there like, yeah. So thank you for reading that. Honestly, hearing just the beginning few pages has my mind going a mile a minute. But to begin, this is your release day. Yay. Very exciting. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm so nervous. When you work on something that's been in your head for so long, and you've thought about your characters and you've thought about the world and you've thought about, what are sort of the intersections of the way that you want to tell the story, and you sort of pattern it in a certain way, and you're proud of it, but then it releases, and once it released, like today, the book, it's mine, but it's not mine anymore.
Yeah.
It's the readers, and that is such a strange place to be in, because as a creator, I'm still thinking about the book, and I'm still thinking about the characters, and I'm still thinking about, what I could have said, or what I should have added, or what, should I have switched your head is still in this space of like creation. And so it's special in a lot of ways, but then that's what makes it scary. Makes it scary. But yeah, no, it feels good to be in a space around family and friends, and being able to share this moment in a way that I didn't have a chance to the first time when my book came out. So
Yes. And as the wise old adage goes, I'm an artist and I'm sensitive about my so having it out in the world is definitely like you're sending your baby off. And now it's however it's received, but it will be wonderfully received. So, just so y'all know, we're not looking at text messages. We have the questions on our phone. Okay.
high tech here.
Yes. So, tell us about Invisible Sun. What inspired you to write this story?
Yeah, so, there was so much going on in 2020 and 2021, and so much of this sort of collective experience in a way that I think and this entire generation had never experienced before, but it was something that we were doing it isolated. We were doing it with our small circles, we were doing it in our spaces, and a lot of my inspiration came from a lot of the visits and the students that I work with. So my other hat that I have is vice provost at the University of Oregon, and I do that work now remotely, but in that space and time, I had a lot of my students, especially Black students, who were not only experiencing the pandemic, a lot of them were first generation students. They were the first students to, about to graduate, and they wanted that big experience. They wanted the cap and gown. They were, in the high school visits, the students wanted their prom, and they wanted to look up to all these different things, and then that stuff didn't happen for them. And then all of a sudden there was, this sort of racial reckoning that was happening, and you were told to be safe in your spaces, but then you were called and pulled to be out there. And a lot of people had a lot of feelings about it. And so, that really inspired me to think about some of the greats that I always look to when I think about classics of work, and that's like Invisible Man and Native Son, the ways in which they talked about a particular experience, a particular time. I really thought about a lot of my students and the high school students when I was doing high school visits who loved my first story. They loved This Is My America. They loved Tracy, who was a brave, girl that they were, so excited to be able to say wow, you can be so strong and so relentless. And then a lot of my, male students that I was interacting with were like, I want this character, but like in my own book. And having now a 16-year-old son, that was really important to me to be able to sort of think about, how can I sort of take a lot of the themes that I had in my first novel, which a lot of my work, I call it social justice thrillers. They're critical issues on what's happening in the world and how young people are navigating those experiences on top of having family and, having hopes and dreams and relationships and friendships, and they're dealing with all of those things in their own sort of space. And so that really was my, inspiration to think about telling this story in a particular time period, in a particular community, where I know so many of my students and having family in had a different kind of experience living in a city with more Black Lives Matter signs than Black people, which is an interesting. It was an interesting time to be in that space, and I wanted to honor that experience.
I must say, I think you did a wonderful job representing what that moment in time was, and the fact that these are still issues that are still very important that we all continue to grapple with to this day, even though it does seem like there's a shifting away from these ideas. They aren't as prevalent to some people anyway. So, as you mentioned, this book is about Andre, D-R-E. Okay. And presumably, he is on this cover right here, a beautiful cover. Tell us about Andre, and then also like what this cover means to you, because it really is so gorgeous.
Yeah, no, so Andre is someone who is very loyal, and he makes a lot of decisions based on truth and loyalty. And sometimes those are decisions that we don't want Andre to make. But that's a reflection, I think, of a lot of young people who are learning and growing in themselves about who you are and what your identity is and how you bring that and the hopes and dreams of the generation before you and your family and your parents. And that really drives him in a lot of ways of this story, and to the point where he's so loyal that he gets set up for a crime that he didn't do and has to go on this journey to sort of really investigate during the pandemic where he can't really navigate the community as much. And the cover was really important to me. And when I think about my son's hair is different, so this doesn't look like my son. So, but the things when I think about my son that I really wanted to like have represented when they shared about like, I really want to go with the same cover illustrator that I did. His name is Chuck Styles. He's out of Philly, and he's an incredible artist. His website is Art of Style, Chuck Styles, and he does these amazing canvas prints. And I really wanted. My son was like he was growing out his hair, and there was such a time period that like embracing your hair and in a lot of different ways. Was really frowned upon, and it was so important to me to have that like representation. And so I really wanted it to be like similar to my first cover, where Tracy on the main cover, her hair is like braided, and you just don't often see that in a lot of different covers and ways. And he has like a cross on his neck, and my son, he like that's his thing, he has to, and so it was like so representative of that, and so that was really important. And then the artist did some really cool things, and thinking about so many of the themes of my book is about invisibility, being seen and not seen. And so the way that the cover sort of like disappears into his skin and the title kind of fades away was just a way I think of like recognizing the piece. And the last was, I have a really, really supportive publisher, and with both of my books, I'm like, I want my main character loud and proud on the front in your face. Because for so many years, so many covers, especially by either diverse authors or Black authors, they often didn't get that. They got like, it was like a little mini person, or it was like a side shot, or like, it's like the back of them and they have a sign or something. And that to me was really because of what I write is so in your face that it was important to me to be like, I wanted people to like be in the face of that character, so that when they jump into that story, they're having that experience.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting that you were talking about, you know, this time of not being able to embrace your hair. And I know during COVID, a lot of people were just like, well, I'm inside. I'm going to try something new, you know? So being able to see this reflected on the cover is so impactful. Like, growing up, I remember that, you know, the books that we read did not have characters who looked like us. And if they did, the stories were not always things that we could resonate with. And so now, to be in this space where we as writers are able to write the books that we wish were on the shelves when we were younger, and I still read all the young adult books now, so that's really great. And you kind of alluded to this too, in the fact that you had the same author who worked on This Is My America working on Invisible Sun. How was the process or the road to publishing these two books similar or different?
Yeah, I mean, the publishing This Is My America was a long road to be able to get an agent, and because of the themes that I was writing about, you had to find the right editor who was like, yes, we need this, and young adults can handle, you know, these themes, and it's such a crossover. You know, I have probably the same amount of readers that are young adult versus, you know, like I get emails from like 70-year-old white men in like, you know, a senior center who was like, my book club read your book. You know, it's like I have that range, which is so amazing to be able to have. But finding an editor who got that was really important, and finding an agent who would be really supportive. And so I took a long time to be able to write, you know, my novel. And when it went out to editors, there's a lot of bumps that I think especially Black authors go through. And I was really fortunate. I sold my book really, really quickly. But one of my first rejections was from a big 5 publisher who was like, you know, oh, I really love this, but it's not going to be bigger than The Hate You Give. And which is like the biggest book. And if that's the standard for a Black author, like that is that is just so impossible. We'll never have books, you know, out there. And my book's so different. Like I love Angie Thomas's book. But my writing and our books are different. And I think that that's such a symbol of publishing in a lot of ways, is that they just don't know the nuances and the need to have so many different stories. And with this, Invisible Sun, it was really different because the timing was different. I didn't have the years sort of like leading up to it.
The contract.
Yeah, the contract. You get a contract, and I'm with Penguin Random House, and they want that book like way in advance, like you know, 10 months ahead of time, because they go through this whole process and it has to be like done and polished and ready. But I was working on, during the pandemic, right after my book was released, I was finishing up working on a YA historical that was set in 1955. And that book was done, like the draft was done. And I'm a writer who comes to writing in a different kind of space. I come to it from someone who was so involved in leaning in on issues and organizations and like being engaged with the moment and the things that were happening. And the story came to me, and it came to me so clearly that my editor had my novel and she was editing it, and we met to go over like the notes that she had for me. And then I told her about my idea for my book, and I said, I really feel like I'm actually supposed to write this book, which is like a kind of a crazy thing to say. Just so you know, it's like a thing you just like.
I love that.
An editor would be like, "What? Are you out of your mind? Like we're on a timeline." And she said, you know, send me your like 2 weeks, send me your proposal and your chapters. And she read it and she was like, "You're right." And you know, I even though I think so many people, especially writers at the time, we didn't want to write about COVID. We didn't want to write because, one, it's triggering in a lot of ways. And at the time when I was writing this, things were constantly changing, like on not even a day-to-day basis, but like an hourly basis, you're getting new news about something that was happening. And as a writer, when you're working on something and you're going to take a year to work on it, a year to work with your editor on it, and then like a year later it comes out, you don't know what the world is going to be like. And so it was great at first writing a historical, but I kept thinking about, you know, I'm trying to put myself in the space of this particular character in 1955, And while I feel like I'm doing a good job to the time period and those things, could I ever 10 years, 20 years from now reflect upon the moment that was occurring, the experiences, the compression of how life really felt? Could I get that right? And I'm like, I couldn't. Like, even working on a draft and then 6 months later going back to edits, like, you'd have to remind yourself of like, oh wait, did masks become like a dominant thing like at this moment, and I'd have to go back and think, oh wait, no, it didn't. And so and that's my long-winded answer to how I don't even know what the question was now. Yeah, hopefully I nailed it.
You nailed it. You were there the whole time.
Okay, yeah. I'm on the same page.
Yes. I will say, shout out to your editor for letting, like the spirit move you to be able to write this story. Because, sometimes folks don't always allow for that space to just go with where the story is taking to you. Because you won't believe it. Like, the characters, they speak to you sometimes. It's like you hear them clearly and you're like, I need to get this story off the page. So, shout out to them.
Yeah.
And definitely, as I was reading this, just as you were saying, like trying to remember when we started wearing masks, when things were changing, like when I noticed the dates at the start of the chapters, and I was like, February 2020, and like Andre leaving, like mentioning, there's this thing going around in Italy, and just all these esoteric ideas that weren't concrete yet, and that was how so many of us were feeling in that moment. So that was just masterful how you did that. I'm like, I went to look to see when like most of the country shut down, looking out for March 15th, like just going down. It was like a countdown. So there was that like air of thriller element for me in that way, just knowing what was coming with this whole pandemic. But then also, Invisible Sun is a mystery, is a thriller. What draws you to these genres that you do so well? And also young adult in general.
Yeah. I think kind of going back to what we were talking about, not having books when you were younger that were representative. I loved to read, like elementary and middle school. I was a huge avid reader, would go to the public library, have a stack of books. But I didn't read a book that I can recall by a Black author about a Black person till I was in college. And I was living in Oregon, which is like even worse, right? And I think so much of my interest in thrillers and mysteries was what I did end up reading a lot of was mysteries and thrillers and ghost stories, because while I might not have seen myself directly in those characters, I was able to build the empathy, which I think is that sort of amazing experience that books can actually do. But I could see myself in a lot of different characters, but like I could really see myself in solving the mystery. Like really like I was then thrown into like, my goal in the story maybe not be to resonate with the main character was like, but I'm gonna solve it maybe before the main character solves the thing. And so that's why I have such a love of being able to write stories like that. And I think that for me it really helps sort of balance. I really want to be able to have characters be rendered that feel real to me, even with those thriller kind of elements and moments that sort of like get you like, oh, child, don't do that. Like those things that you like as a parent. I don't want my kids doing any of the stuff that any of these characters are doing. But it really, I think, for any reader coming in, it helps them maybe if they don't have the experience of Andre, or they don't have, his background, or they don't know anyone like an Andre, they can open themselves up enough to be like, but like I care about like this thing happening with this person, and I want to go on the journey. And I love being able to balance that, and I love being able to write characters like Andre in this book, and then Tracy in my other book, while they're going through challenging things that deal with like mass incarceration and the criminal justice system, they're coming at from a very different place. but they also are coming at from like they are the engine of resolving what's going on. And so it's I think a different I think with a thriller where the main character is a part of the solution in the story, it gives them agency in a way that I think helps me tackle challenging topics and topics that I think are very difficult and topics that I think a lot of people don't want to be in a space to sort of sit in that book because if you step on your door, like that's the real world. That's like what is really happening. And so that's I think why I kind of balance out writing stories in that way.
Yeah. I mean, as we know, books are being banned all over the country. And there's a literacy scholar named Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop, and she always talks about books being mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. So a mirror where you can see yourself reflected, a window where you might not have that experience, but you can then see somebody who has an experience and see the similarities. And then also sliding glass doors, which is that ability of books to help people to come inside, to engage in a way that they aren't always comfortable to do that in real life. And so reading makes us critical thinkers. And so hearing you talk about how growing up you would go to the library, we were definitely library girls too. Like our parents didn't let us watch TV during the weekday, so we had to read. And you talked a little bit about why you write, the stories that you write, but what is the actual process like when you're like, okay, I have to sit down, I have to put the words to the page, like what does that process look like for you?
Yeah, I mean it has to come from a space of like inspiration. And that's, I'm, at least right now, I'm not the kind of writer that is like, all right, give me a concept and I'm just gonna write it. Like that's not inspiring to me. The characters' voices don't speak to me. And so it really has to be something sort of sitting in my brain that I can't stop thinking about. And if I can't stop thinking about it and I'm problem solving and I'm like so in my head that I know it's time to write it down. And I like to just start writing. Like the first 20, 30,000 words of a novel, which could be like, I don't know the number, maybe like 50 to 75 pages, I'm not even sure. And I'll just rewrite and I'll just write it out. And if I can get through there and I'm still excited, then I know that it's like, oh no, this is a real one.
So
this
no
is a
outline,
story.
you just-
I go straight into it. And then when I get to that point, then I'm like, what is this? What am I? Okay, so this kind of makes sense. And then I'll stop and then I'll write what we call a synopsis, which is like, and I write a high level one, beginning to end kind of thing. And then I'll do a chapter outline, but I do it very high level, like it's bullets. Usually it's like key points, because again, kind of going back to inspiration, is I learn so much about my characters as I'm writing them that sometimes your outline just, you're like, my character wouldn't do that. Or like, actually, when these characters interact, this would set up a whole other thing. And I give myself the space to be able to kind of move and navigate with that. So yeah, I kind of balance both. Yeah.
I'm definitely like, let the spirit move me.
Yeah.
And Maritza's like outline. So to work together, we have to I adopted her play. But
It's so fun. It's great.
but we leave space.
Yeah. So I always love hearing about authors' writing processes. So this was great. Tell me, speaking of all these writing and the characters, who was your favorite character to write? Who's the most challenging character to write? Maybe it's the favorite character. Who do you see yourself the most in? I can ask you many questions about it.
I mean, I always really love writing my main characters like that. That's my favorite thing. But my main characters always have like a side homie, and the side homie is always like my favorite character because I like them to be like. I like them to give the main character a hard time, like in a way of friendship, like a true friend would be, and to think about like how they navigate and they kind of like challenge situations and push their friends and so with Andre it's his best friend Boogie for that, and then with Tracy in my other novel it actually was Quincy, which is like she had many like side homies, but Tracy and Quincy, like their relationship, because there's so much voice there. I think I love when the character has a really strong voice, and people can be like, oh yeah, I know someone like that. That's like my favorite thing to write. And then in my stories, I really love to render the familial perspective. Because to me, that's so representative of the Black community.
Absolutely.
And that like when things are happening, there is a mother, there's a father, there's an auntie, there's an uncle, an invisible son. It's a multi-generational family that he's living in. So he's living with his grandparents and his parents, and that relationship, like Andre's grandparents in this story were really fun for me to write, because like there's definitely elements of either like within my family or my husband's family where I can be like, oh yeah, that's my husband's dad right there, or that'd be grandpa, that it's fun to be able to think about those characters in that way that I think often is, I think we're pushed often in young adult spaces to not have that, but to not have that just wouldn't be reflective of me, especially the wild stuff when they're running around town, like somebody's gonna be like, what are you doing?
Exactly.
Like, stay home,
Yeah, Andre in particular, like he hops off the page. There are moments where I'm like, oh, it's okay. Mom's not. You want to just give a little smack on the back, like you said, like, what are you doing? So, because your character speaks so, because your characters are so like potent, really. There's a specific scene where I remember gasping, so I won't spoil it. But Andre's essentially, let's say he's running an errand. He's outside, and then he steps a little bit off the path of where he's supposed to be. And then he gets a call from Marcus, who is like, he was in juvie, so like his corrections officer type of person, his counselor. So Andre steps off the path, and the second his foot gets out, Marcus calls him. So talk a little bit about the role of surveillance in this text, because it literally gasped. Like, oh, a step.
Yeah. So something in the beginning of the novel, when I was reading from that first chapter, Andre is he spent 2 months in juvie for something that he didn't do, and his juvenile correction counselor is taking him home, and part of his agreement to come home is that he has to have an ankle monitor, and I really wanted to place that element in the story because so much of the experience of the pandemic, we were sort of forced in a confinement of where we could go, how we could go. There were so many rules, right, that we had to follow, and I wanted another layer of compression, of tension, so that 20 years from now, someone who maybe barely remembered it or didn't experience so much of what we went through, that they could feel that tension of confinement in that way, and part of it is connected to the title of being seen and unseen, and being tethered in a way. And in the novel, Andre has a moment where he talks about hating the fact that he has an ankle monitor, but also saying but in reality, I feel like I've always had one. I've always had to watch how I am, where I am, how I act, in a way of that sort of surveillance component. And again, so much of my work is about the mirror and how do you do that to sort of help people experience it. So yeah, and then the tension moment, that's that's how you make the thriller.
Yes.
Literally shook. I will say. Okay, so one of my favorite aspects of this book are the chapter titles. They're so fun. You mentioned that they are named after songs. I know why, but tell everyone else what your inspiration was for naming the titles, and then also what your favorite song on the list is.
Yeah. So for my first novel and my second novel, again, just because there's so much tension and things going on, for some of my readers, especially for my Black readers who maybe are like, oh, do I really want to dig into this? I kind of want to prepare them. And so a chapter title is almost a preparation of okay, what can I expect? And it's so high level in a way, but then it has that connection to it. And so, part of the interest with with Andre, and why I thought about chapter song titles is another sort of inspiration when I started to think about the characters in my book was, you know, being stressed with work and like working more than I'd ever had worked before during the pandemic. Our kids were home and they were like on their computers doing school, and there was just so much going on, and it was just so stressful in a lot of ways. Like little moments of joy that I had, what I would just like really relish it. And one moment of joy that like just made like my heart feel so much is watching these young black young adult men on their YouTube channel reacting to music for the first time called Twins Trends, and they would just like the way that they would react to the music was filled with so much joy because they weren't like dogging the music, like they were like fully embracing all aspects of music. And I remember one of them that really sparked the idea was they were listening to Phil Collins in the Air Tonight.
Yes.
And like when the beat dropped, and they were like, and then like I knew the beat was gonna drop, and I'm like, I can't wait to see how they did. And it was like that moment that I was like, I was like, I want to write about like kids like in this moment. And so with Andre, he has his own YouTube page, and that's a way that I do some lightness in the novel. When you have heavy topics, I really like to like help my readers kind of like calm a bit or like laugh and have like joy. And so his music channel like played a lot of different ways in that. And I love music, and I love, you know, like I was like, they do songs from like the 80s and 90s. And I'm like not trying to listen to this new stuff. I'm sorry, young readers. I just can't. And so a lot of it was just like, and it ranges from all kind of music. And I really wanted that to be reflective and do that in that way. So yeah.
So I'm hearing your favorite song was still DRE. I think it was. Good choice.
It is one of my favorites. I will have to say that Only God Can Judge Me is probably one of my favorites. And then X Factor.
Ooh,
yeah. Those are
I'll take that.
those are some of my favorites. Yeah.
Yes. It's so funny because like when I was getting started to reading the book, I read through the chapter titles and I was like, oh, okay, I know this song. And then I had like literally roller coaster. I was like, oh, these songs are so great. I can't wait to see how you use it. And then when I realized that Andre was looking at them as oldies, I was like, oh, yeah. It hurts. It hurts. Yeah. I was like, all right. You know, I had to shake it off a little bit. So, you know, you talked a little bit, or, you know, in this time about what your inspiration was, how you use music to help prepare the reader for what it is that they're about to delve into when they start reading this book. What do you want the reader to take away from Invisible Sun? Like, you know, when they read that last sentence, they read the author letter, and they close the book. Like, what feeling?
Wipe those tears.
Yeah, wipe those tears.
Yeah.
What feeling do you want them to go away with?
Yeah. I mean, you know, with the work, because I have so many complex things going, and I like to resolve certain moments, and I like to give hope in some moments, but I also want it to be reflective. And so with my stories, not everything goes the right way or the way that we would want. Like hard things happen in my work, and good things happen in my work, and I think for me that leaves that bearing witness to reality, and a little bit of a call to action. Like that's, I get emails, and I got one last night from a young student, and she just finished reading This Is My America, and she asked in the end, like, what happened between these two characters that were like may or may not have been in a love triangle, and are they still together? And I love leaving just like little like from the hard stuff to like the light stuff, because then you're thinking. I want to leave my readers. I want them to still think about my book, even if some of it they're like, man, why should you do it like that, or like, oh man, I wish I would have, like all of that, because then you're still thinking about it and you're reflecting on it, And especially, I think, because of the way that I write and the things that I write about, you know, people come into my work in a lot of different ways. And some people are just like, they want to read a book and they want to have the answer. And they want to be like, oh, good, glad I don't have to worry about this anymore, because it's like, oh, I'm settled. And that's not, like, we have so much going on that's not enough for me. And so I really want to leave readers with a lot to think about, a lot to chew on, a lot to like want to reflect on and that kind of thing.
Yeah, there's this moment in the book where there are a whole bunch of people calling the bookstore, and like they're just like, I need that book about those black men on the cover. Can you tell me about the book? And he was like, oh, would you like our $100 like police brutality starter pack or something like that? He was like, yeah, I'll get that. Like that, a lot of people do just want
Quick
a
solution.
exactly, and it's never like that, is it?
Yeah.
So for folks who want to write stories like yours, who leave people thinking, have things that they want to go do and pursue after, what advice do you have to them?
For writers?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, you know, I think it's important to read widely and understand it takes time to figure out your voice. And it took me time to figure out. And I'm still like refining and thinking about what mark do I want to leave on this planet. Like if I was to look back, and it would be, hopefully I've left a body of work that is always growing and changing and may or may not resonate with the times, but it's representative of who I was at the time as an author. And I think it takes time to learn that voice. And so for writers, I think it's so important to recognize that it's an ongoing iterative process. And, you know, to be a writer, you have to do, right? Whether it's thinking in your head or writing it down, that that you're like creating this art that should be you, right? So like maybe when you're writing that first book, it might feel a lot like someone else's work because you're kind of emulating other people's work, or you're inspired to write something like that. But use it as a way to really think about, okay, well, if I'm writing like that, why would someone read my work? You know, and I think it's really hard as a writer to think about, you know, you see something so like Jesmyn Ward is such a beautiful writer, and her words are so incredible. I mean, they're just luscious. They're, you know, there's just something about it. And that's what she brings. And I love her and I read her work. But if I was to write like her, then why, like, that'd be second rate. So like, why get my work? You know, and I think that's like, take the time to find your voice. And even if you don't have a lot of time to write, like I'm busy, I've got so much going on, but there's a steadiness that if you just like put a little, I talk about it like you're building a sandcastle. And you've got a whole bunch of sand and you just kind of have to slowly gather it. And then like eventually, like if you're steadily working on it, you'll start to build those castles and it will become something, and to keep making progress on it and not think about how hard it is to get there, but like be in the moment and the process and being consistent and knowing that it just gets better the more and more you work on it.
Yeah, there are definitely times when you read a text and you see the words, you're like, I know these words individually, but the way you put them together, I'm like, this is so great. So, you know, you've had a few, I'm sure many events now that you've been able to talk about your work, and this is, you know, the launch of Invisible Sun. What's a question that you wish people asked you about your work, like about writing in general? Because I know for Maritza and I, sometimes we'll go spaces and, you know, it's different when you're in a space of, you know, people who look like you or who think like you or who feel resonating, that they will resonate with the text. So what's something that you wish that people would ask? I know, I'm really putting you on the spot.
Really should have thought about this. Oh my goodness.
But this is not a lightning round.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, what are the things that you would want people to ask? And then that might give me some time to think about.
You know, I wish that they asked a little bit more about just how you navigate the responsibility of the text with your desire to also tell an engaging story. You know, like as an author, especially when you're writing Black characters and they have these epic things that they're going through and they're working through, sometimes you have to consider, you know, if someone reads the character and they see themselves in this, how will that person who sees themselves in the character feel? Or, you know, if they don't see themselves in this character, what might someone who maybe doesn't have this background take away from this text? So like, I guess that's what I would want, because I'm like, now let's get into it.
Yeah, I mean, I think connected to that, it might not be the question that I'd want to ask, but have asked about me. But as I think about, oftentimes because of the work that I do, and again, I have different kinds of readers. When people ask like, what are you teaching people? And I'm like, I'm not, like, I think works by Black authors aren't, unless you're Ibram Kendi, and you're like, you have your stamps and anti-rape. Like, I'm actually not, I don't feel like that is like my core. I know there are lessons and themes and things that different people kind of take away. And, you know, and I think when people approach my work or work like mine, contemporary, that, what are the good ones, you know, like when people, you know, think about, it's almost like then they're not thinking that these are like real people. You know, like we don't have to be a lesson, we don't have to be a body that is, you know, out there in that way. And I think it's tricky for when we write about topics that are real issues that are occurring, is like we are toggling this really fine line of I'm not trying to be a part of the gaze. Like that's not, but knowing that I'm opening up my work to be approachable for any kind of reader and writing in layers. And so I think for you know us doing this work, we're writing in layers. And there's some things that some of our readers aren't going to get because they don't have that background. And it's important that they are able to feel like that piece is for them. And so I think, you know, that's my like roundabout way of not really answering your question, but things I think about when I'm asked certain questions or how people sort of approach the work in a different kind of way than like in the way that I'm intending or the way that I would want to have my work be looked at.
That's why you gotta reread the text. Like,
Yeah.
you know, you'll go back and read something, you know, the first time, and you're like a Toni Morrison. You know, the first time you read it, you might really yell, and you're like, okay, I don't really understand. And then you read it as an adult, you're like, whoa, she really spitting on this page, you know? So yeah, being able to reread will help that too.
Yeah, I'm definitely thinking of those moments where, or the different types of panels that will be invited to.
Oh yeah.
And what you show up and it's like, yes, of course you're here. Hello, good to see you. Which is always fun. But that's a beautiful, beautiful sentiment. Like your characters aren't lessons; they're people who live and love and just are existing, and we're, you know, getting a piece of their story. Our final question is, I mean, acknowledging that this is a very exciting, special day. First day Invisible Sun is out. Woo, woo. And you totally say, I don't know, leave me alone. But what's next for you, Invisible Sun? Anything else that you want to mention?
Yeah, so that historical thriller that I was writing, I finally, it's finally done. And it does come out next year, and it's called The Color of a Lie. And the cover is fire.
We're ready.
But it's not out, it's not, you know, you can't show it yet. But yeah, that's what's next with me. And, you know, a lot of my work, I talk about the past is always present. And so my first works and my second novel, they're very present, but there's so many elements in thinking about generational, our foundation, our sort of footing of how systemic things, how we got there. And so I really wanted to, you know, address different kinds of topics. And so my book, you know, manages the American suburban dream and where that came from and who had access to it and who didn't have access to it. And that sort of like post-World War II era where there were Black vets who, you know, fought, you know, fascism, and they came home to see that, the hypocrisy of it, and a family that ends up being white passing and makes a decision to move into an all-white community. And so it has lots of thriller elements, but like love and contemporary aspects. And so I'm really excited for it. And I've never written historical, and it was a really great challenge. And I'm so glad that I actually had a long time to work on it, because I think it's so important to think about and honor that particular time period and everything. So yeah, that's what's next. So
And that's why Sankofa was chosen. You know, that you're back to go forward. Very nice. All right. So thank you everyone for coming. We will, I guess, open it up for questions for a little bit if we can. So yeah. So if you have any questions, I don't know how we'll do this.
Oh, yeah, I can take the mic.
All right.
and they can take questions too.
So thank you for this discussion. I'm really looking forward to reading the book. And this is actually, I guess, for all of you, I'd love to hear you talk about some of the books that have really made an impression on you. I know it's hard to say your favorite books or your favorite writers, but just the 2 or 3 books that you've experienced that you walked away from and said, this has left a lasting impression on me. I'll remember this for a lifetime.
Well, there's so many. It's so hard. I've read Jesmyn Ward's work so much. Salvage of the Bones, like that. Again, just that really, really beautiful writing. I look at classics a lot, and I look at it from the perspective of the time period and understanding the time period, and not necessarily looking at what we know now and the kind of decisions that we would think about some of the things that happened. And so, James Weldon Johnson, an autobiography of an autobiography of a former ex-colored man. Thank you. Invisible Man, A Native Son. There's so many that it's so hard for me. But I look at a lot of classics. I do, and I'm always reading like what's current, and I think I look at it like a craft and like, oh, that's inspiring, and Angeline Boulley's Firekeeper's Daughter and The Warrior Unearthed. Like, she's doing some really, really cool things with her work that's similar in terms of like having a mystery element, and so I love looking at that. But I'm often always looking at the classics as a way to, I think, be inspired. So James Baldwin, and I think I look at them a lot because I think about like reading the work, thinking about the time, and how long lasting that work is as a way to inspire me to think about my career and the footprint that I want to leave. I think is why I sort of resonate with those areas.
Oh, thank heavens you gave me the microphone. I needed to go before her, just in case she took my answer. So,
Sisters.
Yeah. My favorite authors would definitely be Edwidge Danticat and He's a Boy. I know. They are, Edwidge Danticat is the OG of Haitian American authors. Yeah. She is who we were able to look up to growing up as young readers today, now. Like, the work that she has created is just so beautiful, and like I still remember how I physically and emotionally felt finishing The Farming of the Bones, and just like how depleted I was in the best sense, of course, but like her words are truly just magic. And Evie's a Boy has continued this like honoring of Haitian culture, Haitian American culture, the childhood immigrant experience, along with a whole range of other issues. As we know, she writes a whole bunch. So I really admire those two for the steps they've been able to take to make us feel welcome in this industry and know that it's possible that we can tell these types of stories and pursue this career. And then also Pride and Prejudice, because the Bennett sisters are basically me and my 3 other sisters, and Mrs. Bennett is totally our mom. So I will stop there.
Okay, so since she took Evie's Boy and Edwidge Danticat, I knew it. That's why she raised it to the mic.
Yeah.
in addition to those two amazing Haitian authors, I would also add, of course, it's like Elizabeth Acevedo. So I read,
Yes.
I read, Elizabeth Acevedo has a poem called The Ode to the Rat. She's writing about a rat, but you'll feel like you want to cry at the end of it. I'm like, how'd you do that? But there's a book that she has called The Poet X. I believe it was her first novel.
Yeah.
And, you know, our family, we had been in Haiti. You know, it's like I'm basically in a room with my many, many Haitian family members. And I'm in a corner just sobbing. Because I felt like I was seen in that book. I was like, wow, an angsty girl who writes poetry and all of these things. So that very much resonated with me. And I would say, in terms of a recent book that I read that I was just like, ooh, that was so good. The Weight of Blood by Tiffany D. Jackson. Listen, you need to read that book. If you love thriller, if it just really like, as the character is going through it, it's I don't know, I feel like I don't know what's a spoiler, so I won't say anything, but just read read that book. Truly, like I finished that and I was like, oh, I could reread it, I could see it on the big screen. So yes, I love books that are an escape, even when they talk about contemporary things. Like it's still, you know, the characters are kicking butt and doing all these things. And you're like, yeah, get them. So love it.
Does anyone else have any questions?
So I understand that you guys have explained how a lot of your motivation has come from previous books that you guys have read. But one of my questions is, what kind of pulled you to stick with with writing a book and actually using the, I guess, perseverance to continue and the patience of writing each word?
Yes. You should be proud, Danny. Great question. It is a difficult industry, especially if you go the traditional published route. But I think if you have the persistence and the passion and the love for writing, you know, you will move to the space of being successful because it's such an interesting industry because you could be any age and publish a book. You can be 15 and you can be 80 and have your first book. And it's one of the most challenging industries to break into, but it's one of the most open in terms of the time that you can be there. And for me, once I got out of my daydreaming world, because I did come into actually thinking that writing was a strength of mine. It wasn't until like 12 years ago, I'm gonna stop saying my age now, so I'm just gonna say years ago. Because when I was talking to young people, they're like, oh, but that I actually just started writing. And before that, even though I've been to grad school and been to college and all these other things, if you were to say what my weakness was, I would be like, it's writing. Like, oh, I'm not a good writer. Oh, I'm bad at grammar. Not good at that. Once I realized I was always a storyteller. Yes. I was always daydreaming. I was always problem solving. I was always thinking about it. And it, the first thing that I started writing was messy. It needed work. But I loved it. And that's what keeps me going.
Okay, so for me, sometimes I ask myself that as well. I really don't know. But we spent so much time growing up not being able to watch TV and reading so many books that we did not physically see ourselves in. And we loved those stories, we really identified with a lot of white girls with red hair.
That was diversity at the time.
Yeah, it was a whole thing. But we loved those stories. But it was just, you always felt like you were missing, like you were invisible. So just being able to have that in your head as you're writing these stories and knowing that other people will want to read them, that we will want to read the story, that it's actually an enjoyable process to do most of the time. That helps. And then it also helps when you're on contract and you have to produce something. But before that, it's still just a beautiful process of telling a story and wanting to share that with the person that you're writing with or just the world, because like we all have very beautiful, interesting stories to tell, made up or real.
Yeah, I would say too, just writing has always been something that I have used to be able to cope with the world. So the angsty poems that I wrote were very bad at the beginning. I know they weren't, but I would perform them like they were great. But it helped me to be able to process so many of the emotions that I had. And so I will read a quote to you that I try to insert all the things I can, even at work. I actually, one of my coworkers, Joe, is here, and my cousin Beanie is here. So I went to, Sabine, sorry, I said her nickname. Okay. She's like, don't. But there's a quote, and it's from the now ancestor Bell Hooks, and I will read it for y'all. A powerful way we connect with the diverse world is by listening to the different stories we are told. These stories are a way of knowing. Therefore, they contain both power and the art of possibility. We need more stories. And so for me, when I am writing, I am thinking that I am going to have a text that someone can see themselves in. And it makes me so glad that, the way that I grew up wishing that I could see myself reflected on the page, I am helping to eradicate that for future generations. Like as Black authors, we think a lot about legacy, like what is it that I am going to leave behind in the works that I write. So that fuels me. So when there's drama, because you would be surprised, publishing has a lot of drama. But I'm like, let me stay out of that and keep on writing because I know what it is that I am trying to do. So wonderful question, great job.
Any more questions?
This is a question, but I guess also like a moment of praise. Writing a novel is, no easy feat, but then I think also having one of those adapted and, into a TV series or TV adaptation is also really amazing. And so for Kim, I'd love to hear a little bit more about kind of what that process has been like for you getting, that first novel adapted by, settled to be adapted by HBO Max, and then kind of what you're looking forward to.
Yeah.
Come on, Joe.
You want to talk about publishing? Oh, Hollywood. It's like get into that. Oh goodness, it's a whole other world. That was not even on my list of things to happen. I mean, it was that after I got my agent and my book was soon to be published, and I was seeing other authors Angie Thomas, that You Give came out, and I was like, oh, whoa, people do or whatever, and so my agent identified like some film and TV agents to connect with, and after selecting one, I still didn't think it was a thing, and right after my book was published, and started having meetings with production companies that all had their interest in wanting to have the rights for my work, and they all had their sort of like a vision of what they thought my story should be like, how it should live, whether it should be film or whether it should be television, and really trying to like understand the language that they use in Hollywood, because it's very different. You're all fabulous and wonderful. Like it's very there's a lot of that, and so you have to really kind of understand okay, but who really gets my work, and so it was a really long process to be able to get with a production company that then eventually worked to sell the rights with HBO, and the way that I opted was I decided that because I had so many characters and the way that I thought my story could actually go on, I thought a film wouldn't actually do justice to the story and the other aspects that could go on and the other characters that people are still emailing me about, like small characters, and oh, you want to know more about this person? Okay. That I thought a television series was the best way to go, because it's each season could be something new. And so, that process has been strange because it's a very quiet process, and it's not you can't actually research a lot online, and it's very quiet, and you don't hear anything for a long time. Then all of a sudden you get, they're like, we want to talk to you tomorrow. I was like, oh, okay. And you were like, wait, is it good news? Is it bad news? And, you know, I've had the good news and the bad news calls. And the good news one was just like, yeah, HBO Max. Yeah. And I'm like, whoa, yeah. But, oh, wait, what? You know, like, okay, I knew, this was happening. And so, yeah, it's an interesting process. And I've learned a lot from other authors who talk about their experiences and things to look out for, and I think that's how we help each other, is by, like, if they don't talk about what happens, that we talk about that work. And you know, there's a writer's strike right now, and there's a lot changing in the industry. There's a lot changing with HBO Max, which is not HBO Max anymore. It's called Max. I don't know what's up with that.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, I'm it's sort of in that sort of like limbo world. But I mean, it's just amazing that, you know, I at least at this point I got that far. So.
Yes. That's amazing.
And we have time for one more question because we're about to transition to another event. Anyone, one more question? Thank y'all so much.
Yeah.
Can you give it up? Thank y'all for the amazing conversation. To everyone in the room, if you purchased your book already on our website, your book is back there at the register with Isaac. And if you haven't purchased the book yet, the book is back there by the register. And there's also some on the table over there. If you aren't aware, we are having a music series event right now, every Tuesday this month and throughout the summer. And we're about to start that as soon as we transition. So anybody who is here for that event, if you want to hold your phone up and have Jonathan will come around and look at everybody's tickets. But thank you all so much. This was amazing. By invisible sun right now. Forever books are sold, but really as in hopefully. Exactly. So thank y'all so much. Kim will be signing books. Yeah.
I do.
Okay.